Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. With an interesting what-if story about Naruto X High School DxD crossover. If you enjoy our content and want even more exclusive content, then join our Patreon page. Now let's start. It was quiet. It was a quiet filled with trepidation. Uzumaki Naruto didn't like that quiet one bit. At least that was what the young man concluded as he sat down to gather natural energy. Especially when it regarded something that he deeply cared about. Konohagakure. Last he saw it, it was not much more than a large crater on the ground. A barren wasteland, really. An empty area that once contained his home. The final clash with the leader of the Akatsuki was a very long and difficult battle, one that held very high stakes for both sides of the conflict. Naruto simply couldn't fail to defeat Pain. Everyone depended on him to win. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't fail. Eventually, after a long fight where the Kyuubi almost broke out of its seal due to the pain of losing another precious comrade, he emerged victorious. Defeating the last path of pain with the last bit of energy he had left in him, earning Konoha's safety. Except his fight didn't end there. Only the physical portion, the easier part. No matter how he looked at it, the blonde was emotionally battered after fighting Pain. His home was destroyed. His loved ones either badly wounded or dead, his sensei, his master. Ero Sennin. He had to face the man that was responsible for all of his recent anguish and pain, to face him. For far more reasons than he cared to admit. For closure. For answers. To end this. All of this. Once and for all. A part of him was afraid though, what would he do when he faced the man? How would he react? After speaking to his father in his mindscape, he had to find out whether he could actually end the cycle that he spoke of. The cycle that helped to create this situation in the first place. Could he let go of the prospect of revenge when he met face to face with the man responsible for his suffering? So when he finally met the man he will come to know as Nagato, he very simply, almost lost it. This was him, the man who took away Ero Sennin, Kakashi-sensei, hurt his friends, destroyed his village, made him watch as another of his precious comrades fell to his ruthless attacks. Unforgivable. But he somehow managed to rein himself in order to listen to Nagato's story. To hear what pain he endured that made a student of Ero Sennin turn into this. He was glad that he listened. Nagato's tragic story helped give him the resolve to truly follow in his predecessor's footsteps. Naruto had no idea if he had the chops to do it. But now he was determined to follow through with his master's and father's wishes. The blonde would take up his father's dream, his mentor's dream, and bring peace to this world. Oh, he still wanted to be Hokage, and nothing was going to change that. But after seeing the after-effects of what this cycle could do to people, a quicksilver image of the Uchiha crest flashed across his mind at that moment, hardening his already rock-solid determination. After seeing what hate could do to the person he considered a sibling. That's right. The young man murmured, determination stealing his voice. It's up to me now. I have to do my best to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. For everyone's sake, he would bring world peace, or his name wasn't Uzumaki Naruto. At least, that was the plan. After Nagato used the Gedo, Rinate Tensai no Jutsu, Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Jutsu, to revive all of the people he has recently killed after he attacked Konoha, Konan took his body to be buried. And so here the shinobi was, gathering natural energy so that he could gather senjutsu chakra. So Naruto quickly entered sage mode, using it to help him sense whether all the inhabitants of Konoha were alive or not. To his immense relief, he sensed the chakra of his many friends and comrades. Meaning that, a happy grin split apart his face, relief loosening the tension from his frame. They're all alive, they're all okay. Nagato did it. He couldn't help but fist pump, cheering loudly, celebrating by himself as he forced himself upright. More than that, he could sense Kakashi-sensei moving towards him, closing the distance between them with great speed. In a pretty damn good mood, Naruto moved to meet him, unable to wait for what he hoped was a hero's welcome back home. Then he stopped in his tracks. Toad-like eyes turned to another section of the forest, wary. Something to his right sensed, off. What the hell is that? Naruto questioned out loud, unsure of what he was sensing. And where did it come from? I don't remember sensing this when I went Sage mode last time. The blonde just stared at that area, weighing in on how he should respond to this feeling. Honestly, after what he had just experienced, he wasn't exactly keen on anything that could possibly do damage to his already damaged village. And this feeling could just do that kind of damage. Or rather, he had no idea what it could do. And he'd much rather check it out and be doubly sure that what he was sensing wouldn't cause trouble than regret checking it later. So he did. Naruto turned on the spot and raced towards the sensation, zeroing in on it with his incredible sensing abilities. Moving at incredible speeds thanks to his senjutsu-enhanced body, regardless of his tired state. He was sure that, whatever it was, he could deal with it. That assurance was very much dashed by the time that he reached the aberration that caught his notice. In a small, insignificant piece of the forest, there was something that was really wrong. He was staring at it, studying it, suspicious of what it exactly was or where it came from. He couldn't really describe it, but if he had to call it anything, he supposed he would call it a fluctuation. As the very air that was emanating this sensation was shifting, as if space itself was rending. It was weird. Naruto already knew that Kakashi-sensei was coming towards him, so just in case this thing proved to be dangerous, the shinobi arbitrarily decided to check it out. Just a few moments ago, his teacher was dead. He was dead. He refused to place him, or anyone from Konoha for that matter, in danger. Especially after this recent ordeal. Bad mistake. The second that Naruto moved to touch the aberration, his hand was gripped by it, almost like he was caught in a vice grip. But the part that actually made him begin to panic was the fact that it began to pull. What the? Hey, let go of my hand, damn it. Naruto cried out, as it slowly began to pull the blonde in despite all of his senjutsu-enhanced strength. He grit his teeth, smashing his feet onto the floor to slow down his forced movement, and even began sticking his feet to the ground with chakra. It wasn't enough, as instead of slowing him down, all his actions accomplished to do was drag the ground with him. The shinobi tried to think of a way out of this predicament, but since his hand was unavailable, he couldn't use hand signs to utilize his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to help him out. Let alone a Kawarimi no Jutsu. His hands were tied, metaphorically and literally in a way. That sucked. Shit. Naruto couldn't help but curse as his entire body began to get swallowed up whole, enveloping him as his sight began to darken at the edges of his vision. One of the last things that he would hear from the elemental nations in a long time was Kakashi-sensei's surprised shout. Naruto was falling. He was falling very fast. The air that was rushing past him could attest to that much. The blonde tried to slow down his descent by flailing his arms, but instead all he did was force his body to twirl around more erratically. So he was obviously way too disoriented to make even think about using a jutsu to get out of this, and he couldn't even tell what was happening either, since the world was spinning around him so fast that he felt like he would vomit. He almost wished that he threw up instead of feeling the pain of crashing into the splash water. The body of liquid he landed in was sent splashing everywhere, going sky high from his impact and crashing against the area around it, overflowing a little bit thanks to the tiny tidal wave he created. Needless to say, the shinobi finally reached the end of his free fall, and he was overwhelmingly thankful that he had his Sage mode on. Otherwise the fall could have ended up being a whole lot worse, and by that, he meant he would have ended up as a pancake. Not pretty. It took a few seconds for Naruto to poke his head up from the water, blinking rapidly in order to recalibrate himself to being upright again, before quickly taking a quick look around him to find out where he was. Trees, pavement, shell-shocked human beings. Was he still in Konoha? Or at least near the Land of Fire? Toad-like eyes shut themselves from the world as the blonde cursed under his breath, annoyed that he was sent on a ride into some weird area. Why couldn't he get a break? There's no way that I'm missing my hero's welcome datbeo. Naruto stated with resolve, his focus on his surroundings as he tried to find out where he was. That can't be right. Naruto snapped his eyes open and forced himself up, refusing to believe what his incredible senses were telling him. There was just no way. It was impossible. Yet his senjutsu abilities couldn't just be wrong, right? The simple fact was that, outside of the still blubbering people he terrified, Naruto sensed a lot of people close by. So much so that he felt like they could have made their own village, really. But that wasn't the issue, the problem was something else entirely. He couldn't sense their chakra. Correction, he couldn't sense anything's chakra. All humans had chakra, even if they weren't shinobi, they had it. Yet, for some reason, these people didn't. He should know. Arrow Sennin made extra sure to jam that information down his throat. Bless his pervy soul. Anyways, Naruto couldn't sense a drop of chakra in anyone, which should be impossible because humans needed it to stay alive. It was tied to their life force, right? So the blonde quickly moved towards the shore, forgetting all about the pain of falling from who knows where in. Wait, shit! The young man cried out, snapping his head towards the sky as he tried to find out if that aberration was still there. Wherever he was in the elemental nations, as strange as it was, that thing could at least be used to return back to Konoha, right? Except he couldn't. Not anymore. To his dismay, he couldn't sense that thing at all anymore. It was quite simply gone. Like it never existed in the first place. Well, there went that idea. How the hell was he supposed to get home then? Okay. He had to relax here, and he had to think. What could have happened to make that rift in the first place? Maybe he could try and make one himself? Basically, what happened today that didn't happen on every other day? Oh. The shinobi realized in a eureka moment, slamming his fist into the palm of his hand. People who were dead were brought back to life. That didn't usually happen, right? So all he had to do to reopen that rift was redo that jutsu. And to do that, all he needed was a pair of Rinnegan eyes. Naruto nodded with a confident smile. Those were very easy to obtain after all. And since that was the case, he would get back home without much trouble. As if. Naruto roared out, slamming his head into the ground with so much strength that it created little spider cracks. He completely ignored the ordinary folks that he horrified by his actions, far too distracted with his own problems to care at that moment. Damn it, Nagato. Naruto groaned out from his spot on the ground, with faux tears flowing down his cheeks at his predicament. His senpai under Arrow Sennin pretty much screwed him without realizing it, though it was also probably his fault as well. Probably. Did a jutsu that brought people back to life have such weird side effects? Or was it something else that he just wasn't seeing? He had no clue, and unfortunately for him, he didn't have any jutsu that could do something as ridiculously impressive as bringing people back to life. Okay then, plan B. He would get back home, by foot. The old-fashioned way it was then. Naruto finally forced himself up from the ground and immediately moved to resume his search, intent on finding out where he was so that he could have some idea of what he had to do to get home. The people that he accidentally terrified just watched the young man go, their collective eyes wide as he began to grumble to himself. No one would believe them when they told anyone else their story, so instead, a new folklore began on the very spot that the orange-loving boy landed on based on what the people there saw. The Lake of the Human Falling Star. It was a stupid legend, and everyone soon forgot about it. When Naruto finally saw the end of the tree lines, which itself signified the end of the park, though he had no idea it was a park, he grinned. Finally, he could see what he was dealing with. So he the blonde did just that and walked out of the park, eyes scanning to check the area. Ah, what the fuck is that? Naruto exclaimed out in shock, completely caught off guard by the rows upon rows of massive buildings that touched the sky. That wasn't the only reason why he reacted as he did, as the very people themselves that were occupying the area were wearing some of the most bizarre clothing he has ever seen. Well sure, he wasn't the go-to guy to find out what the latest fashion was, but he was sure that this was bizarre for the elemental nations in general. Yeah, it was really strange. No chakra. Massive buildings, of which he's never seen before. Bizarre clothing, of which he's never seen before as well. A sinking feeling began to enter his stomach, knocking the air out of his lungs. Where was he? Because he was at least pretty sure that he wasn't anywhere near home anymore. And that realization stopped him cold, his expression going blank for a few seconds. Just as quickly as he went blank though, the young shinobi snapped out of it and coughed, a smirk interlacing his features. Fine, the shinobi said with that very same smirk. If life wants to throw me for a loop, then I'll let it give it a shot. But I won't give up quite that easily. That was right. He's faced bigger challenges than this, and he has come out on top. He wouldn't get crushed by this, definitely not. With that determination in his hands, he glanced about himself, his confidence shaking slightly as another problem just hit him. Great. He had confidence. So what now? How the hell was he gonna get back home? Oh. Naruto piped up, answering his own question. Information. He needed info, and fast. To that end, the blonde quickly shuffled out so that speak to someone, hoping that whoever he spoke to could help him out. The first one that he locked onto was heading straight for him, moving at decent speeds while moving a wheel inside a metallic object on wheels. Figuring that it was the only way to get his attention, the blonde ran in front of the presumably mechanical vehicle and waved his hands wildly. That definitely got the man's attention. Scree asterisk. The harsh sound of rubber sliding against concrete echoed around him, with the vehicle slowing down significantly before it could reach him. Beaming, Naruto walked up to the man, a question at the tip of his tongue. "What the hell are you doing, you crazy brat? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" So said the elderly man, apoplectic at the fact that a young man wearing a tattered orange jumpsuit ran in front of his car and nearly got ran over. But the spiky-haired teen completely ignored that, instead opting to ask his questions in a manner that reminded the normal human of a machine gun. "Hey Jii-chan. I got a few questions for ya. Do you know where I am? Do you have any shinobi around here? What about a village leader? Or rather, do you have a map, cause that could actually be helpful? Wait, before you answer that, can I first ask why you're using this thing? Couldn't you move faster running? I mean, yeah, you're pretty old, but I think you could use the exercise Jii-chan." The elderly man heard exactly none of the questions that the blonde was spitting out. Instead, all he heard was, Jii-chan. "Listen you rude brat." The normal human growled, annoyed at the teenager with terrible fashion sense. "Move the hell out of the way or I will get the cops on your ass." Am I understood? This shook Naruto out of his not-so-subtle admiration of the car, as his impatience pushed him to begin inspecting the not-too-common sight of a vehicle. Especially since it was never really used for transportation back at the elemental nations. Actually, now that he thought about it, maybe he should avoid drawing attention to himself. Except he didn't realize that he was doing just that by both stopping the elderly man by running in front of a car, and continuing to molest the car in front of him. When the elderly man growled in anger again, Naruto took that as his cue to leave before he drew more attention to himself. So after walking away and letting the man go, the shinobi quickly decided that he needed to get information from another source than other humans. As it was obvious that he was gonna make an idiot out of himself at this rate. He would get back home. He had many promises to keep, as well as many people who were counting on him to bring peace to the elemental nations. More than that, he still had to become the Hokage. That's right, Naruto resolved, clenching his fist and sending it to the sky. "I always keep my word, that's my nindo. And I will never give that up." And with that proclamation, the blonde brought his hands together to make a cross-shaped hand seal. He would learn more about this place, one way or another. At least that's what he said 2 months ago. Gah. Just thinking about it pisses me off. Naruto complained lowly, his shoulders hunching over in his failure at getting back home. Yes, roughly 2 months has passed since the blonde first entered this strange land. With no way home in sight. On the bright side, he did manage to find out where he exactly was. To summarize, he was on an island nation called Japan, which was located on the Pacific Ocean near the main landmass of Asia. A continent that, Naruto slapped the front of his forehead, groaning at the fact that he almost did it again. Damn clones were too zealous with their search, and he accidentally got the same information several times over with different clones. Which meant that that specific line was stuck in his head whenever he thought about the word, Japan, which was located on Th. Several pedestrians were shocked and a little worried about the strange young man that was currently bonking his head on the wall of a building. It took a few more bonks to get back to topic. When the blonde managed to stop, he continued on as if he wasn't just slamming his head against a wall. Anyways, while the clones were getting information, Naruto himself decided to be useful and try to get some money. He couldn't live off of an empty pocket after all. He did some odd jobs here and there, which eventually forced him to create a new team of clones to henge into different people to get more money. As he very simply wasn't making enough with jobs that had bosses that didn't ask too many questions. Naruto woke with a start with some drool on his chin, his eyes snapping to check his surroundings, only managing to take in the empty classroom that he was occupying. Oh shoot. The blonde forced himself up, a little confused and disgruntled, until he realized that he wasn't alone in the small room. Blue eyes moved to the right, catching the calm and collected gaze of his new class neighbor. "Woo, what happened? Where is everyone?" Naruto asked, his words slurred as he tried to wake himself up. He forgot how ridiculously boring school was, but he was sure that not even Iruka-sensei was that bad before. It was like watching paint dry with how entertaining it was to listen to the teacher's lecture. How long did he have to do this again? The period ended, Uzumaki-san, just now. Before he left, our teacher asked me to give you a little bit of a tour around the school since this was your first time here at Kuo Academy. Nonaka stated simply, that calm air of hers firmly in place. Wait, the period ended? How long was he asleep exactly? Wait, more importantly, he couldn't have this girl just follow him wherever. He had his own ways of finding out more about places, and he didn't need a babysitter. Namely, clones. But he obviously couldn't do something like that near her. Hey, don't worry about it. I can find my way around just fine. Naruto explained with a cheesy grin on his face, confident as always. He hoped that his words would convince the strangely stoic girl that he was fine, but his hopes were dashed by her next statement. I am the class representative, this is my duty, not a favor for you, Uzumaki-san, and I am adamant about completing my duties. Nonaka stated with her intense gaze staring him down. Naruto stared back, if only out of pure stubbornness, but he eventually gave in regardless. There was no point in arguing against something so small. He just let her have her cookie, and then do what he had to do afterwards. What did he have to lose? He would just be killing an hour, nothing important. Okay, you win, Nonaka-san. Please lead the way, Datbeo. Naruto relented easily, offering a small smile in order to hopefully lower her tension. It didn't work, as Nonaka just stared at him for a few spare seconds before she turned around and grabbed her bag to leave. The blonde watched her go, sweat dropping at her attitude, but followed after her regardless. So Nonaka followed through with what she was assigned to do, taking him around Kuo Academy to see all that the high school had to offer. Introducing him to all of the facilities and important areas. Naruto had to admit, he was impressed at the sheer size of the place, even though it was ostensibly just a high school so far. Though apparently there were other parts of the academy that extended beyond high school, though he wasn't sure. The entire tour took only about a half an hour due to her quick and efficient introductions to everything they saw, causing him to suspect that she wasn't that much happier to be there herself than he was. It didn't really offend him or anything though, he has gone through much worse and learned to not take things so personally as a young adult. Hey, he was sure that his 12-year-old self would demand what her problem was with him though. Uzumaki-san. Naruto blinked, forcing himself to come back to reality as he realized that he must have been musing to himself for a while, since Nonaka was just staring at him, waiting for an answer to whatever she had just said. He took a quick look around and realized that they were at the rooftop of the building, with a beautiful view of the rest of the academy grounds available to them. Actually, why were they even up here? Was this a part of the tour? Naruto then turned back to Nonaka, who was still waiting. Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Can you repeat? Whatever you just said? Nonaka sighed, but did as was asked and repeated herself. I said, is this a good place to stop the tour, Uzumaki-san? On much firmer ground now that he knew what was asked, he grinned and nodded. Yep, thanks for showing me around the school, Nonaka-san. It was a real help. I'll see you around in class, alright? The shinobi was already in the midst of turning around as he was speaking, preparing to head out and escape from the confines of the school. He's had more than enough today. Wait. As demanded, the blonde did indeed wait, freezing himself from opening the door to enter the stairs to enter the building again. There is something that I wish to ask of you, Uzumaki-san. The young woman stated as much as asked, not exactly giving much room to deny what she was asking of him. Naruto turned around and looked at Nonaka, his own blue eyes connecting with her yellow ones, a hidden intensity hidden within their depths. Why was she looking at him like that? What are you, Uzumaki Naruto? Nonaka questioned, no, demanded with a new sharpness in her eyes and face. The shinobi took a step away from the teen, sensing some semblance of hostility from her, shocked at what she was asking. Indeed, her body took on a more aggressive tone as she spread her legs apart and clenched her fists, almost as if she was ready to fight with him at a moment's notice. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Nonaka-san? I must have misheard you. Naruto tried to clarify with a newfound nervousness, trying to reassure himself that the girl in front of him had no idea about the fact that he wasn't a normal human. Nonaka was completely human, of that he had no doubt, so it was impossible for her to learn of his abilities, right? But what if some humans could? Did he do something that gave him away? And who else possibly knew of his unique power? This wasn't good. This wasn't good at all. Don't play stupid, Uzumaki-san. You seem to be human. But the reported energy that you've been giving off suggests otherwise, and an unknown variable cannot be tolerated during this point in time. Nonaka said with growing antagonism, voice firm. As she was speaking, a green aura began to envelop around her arms, a sword appearing from the energy, as well as a pair of metallic gauntlets that formed around her arms. I will ask you one more time. Uzumaki Naruto, what are you? Nonaka finished, her newly formed blade pointing at Naruto. Naruto just stared at her. The blade she just created was aimed at him with ease and confidence, with the poise befitting of a warrior. He made a mistake. He spent so much time focusing on non-human threats that he completely ignored the powerful humans that hid among the weak humans. This blunder can only be described by Naruto in one word. As Naruto stared at Nonaka's blade, he had to remind himself of something vitally important. Something that he would definitely forget if he didn't remind himself constantly. It was a simple fact that most people wouldn't really think too much about, and something that Naruto was forced to think about ever since he realized that he wasn't anywhere near the elemental nations anymore. He was, without a doubt, a ninjutsu specialist. Now most people would think that this wasn't vital information, that this was more of a bit of trivia rather than anything truly important. Well, they would be wrong. Ninjutsu, in its purest form, was a ninja art that was geared towards the destruction of the enemy. It was, in every shape and form, all based on destroying the enemy by overpowering or overwhelming them. Ninjutsu was rarely, if ever, truly subtle or quiet. The fact that Kakashi-sensei's assassination ninjutsu was a lightning attack that was as plain as Naruto's orange clothing should be more than enough evidence of that. But more importantly, why does any of this matter? Well, that's because Naruto really didn't want to gather attention to himself. Ninjutsu would make him stand out like a sore thumb, drawing attention to himself thanks to ninjutsu's destructive capacity, and stuff. That basically meant, no Rasengans or any of their variants were allowed, or even too many clones, since too many copies of one person were bound to draw people's attention. Even while learning more about the world, he only had so many copies roaming the streets, while giving them different looks. He also had no idea how sensing among the supernatural worked either, so gathering natural energy for Sage Mode would be both time-consuming and eye-catching. Thus that left Naruto with one thing left: taijutsu. Now, while taijutsu wasn't Naruto's specialty, he wasn't a slouch in it anymore. He could now hold his own against Kakashi-sensei in taijutsu, and he was fast enough to be a match for him as well. So that meant he was at least an A- rank in those categories. It would have do for now. After Naruto was done with his mental checklist, he turned back to Nonaka and answered her. This may be difficult to believe, but I am a human. Though, I don't know who you are or why you are pointing your sword at me. You should know that I don't attack someone unless they threaten someone that I care about. That, or I am attacked myself. He then lifted his chin, defiant. Basically, I won't threaten the normal students here. I give you my word on that, and I never go back on my word. To be blunt, the blonde really couldn't back down to her right now. No, he had to show her that he couldn't be bullied around. Then again, he also didn't want to antagonize her either. Well, hopefully he found a decent middle ground. Meanwhile, the human female continued to stare at the blonde, pondering his words. Was he really a human? No, that couldn't be true, right? Humans didn't contain strange and foreign energy signals. Unless it was a sacred gear? No, if that was the case, then the censor that tipped the higher-ups of her faction would have made note of it. This was new, foreign. That meant that the being in front of her could very much be a new supernatural entity. And if that was the case, then were there more beings like him? Hidden from view to her faction and mostly unknown. A dangerous possibility. But more than that, did the human known as Uzumaki Naruto pose a threat to the humans in the area? Nonaka's thoughts raced around this person's strange energy and its possible implications. As was her duty in this academy. The hero tribe sent her to this academy as a watcher, which gave her two important responsibilities: to watch over the confirmed devils in the area while keeping a lookout for stray devils, and eliminating them if required. As was her duty as a hero. That being said, she has recently received two more objectives by her faction's leadership. To find and determine whether the new foreign energy that a censor of theirs has picked up near Kuo town was hostile to humanity or not, and to keep an eye out for the last descendant of the original Lucifer. The hero tribe's duty must be fulfilled for the sake of humanity, which it has safeguarded for 2,000 years as the best line of defense against the supernatural. The organization was said to have been founded by the God of the Bible and has since spread across the world to continue their mission in secrecy. None of the supernatural factions were aware of their presence, but they were aware of the heroes that they created throughout history. They were where humans with sacred gears were supposed to go if they wanted to fight instead of live normal lives. Things have changed, however. The introduction of the Devil's Evil Peace system has made recruiting new blood difficult, as many devils have snatched up any human with talent or a sacred gear like collectibles. The hero tribe, thus, had to keep better vigilance over the devils and the other supernatural factions to prevent their fellow humans from being reincarnated into what they saw as a slavery system. A sentiment that Nonaka nominally agreed with. Now, with this strange power in this ostensible human, there was another point of concern to the heroes of this world, one that, given their already difficult circumstances, they couldn't let pass. Which was why the young woman continued her intense stare, finally moving her sword away from his face after a few more tense moments. A green aura appearing on her arm once more, which took her armor and sword away from her. I will trust your word for now, Uzumaki-san. But if you give me a reason to doubt your sincerity, then I, Nonaka Yuki of the hero tribe, will end you. Nonaka Yuki stated with utmost certainty. After all, she was well trained, and she was sure that she could deal with whatever this boy could throw at her. Her warning to him was not really for her own benefit either, but more for the ordinary humans around them. For the sake of humanity. That was the duty of a hero after all. Naruto could have cried in relief, happy that he didn't have to show his hand in a school filled with supernatural beings. He could go back home and regroup from this unexpected wake-up call. Understood, Nonaka-san. I promise you that I won't cause any trouble here. In fact, I was forced into Kuo because a police officer said I was too young to be working. So I'm not here of my own free will, ya know? Naruto stated, in the hopes that she would see that he had no ulterior motives. Nonaka didn't bother to respond as she turned around to leave the rooftop, heading towards her next class since school was still ongoing. She just needed to make sure that Uzumaki wasn't a threat before he could be allowed to leave the premises. Moreover, how stupid did she take her for? There wasn't any kind of law in Japan that dictated that teenagers had to go to high school. Either he was lying or he was tricked. Though, she was pretty confident that he was lying. Meanwhile, as the blonde watched the young woman leave, he couldn't help but believe that he seriously needed to get back to his house in order to figure out how to approach this new problem. Apparently there were also strong humans among the other strange creatures that inhabited this world, giving him more to worry about. He just couldn't catch a break here, could he? The worst part was that, if this girl knew about him, then it was possible that other groups knew about him too. The blonde quickly left the rooftop in order to leave the academy and get back home, where he wouldn't feel like everyone was waiting for him to blow his cover. It was suffocating for someone like him to constantly be aware, forced to be on edge all of the damn time, and keep himself from standing out too much. It just wasn't what he was used to. Even if it was necessary, he still didn't like it one bit. He, very simply, needed to wind down a bit in a place that he could feel like himself without being constantly watched. Hopefully this would be the last incident with this world's supernatural that he would have for a while. Naruto quickly jogged at an average, human pace towards the front of the academy, getting ready to leave, up until he muttered a curse under his breath. Unfortunately for him, he ran head first from one problem into another, this time in the form of one of those strange beings that he still didn't really know about, yet. The girl in front of him was a teenager with black hair that has been shortened and shaped to a bob-cut style, with piercing violet eyes that were framed by a pair of glasses focusing on him as he approached. She wore the typical Kuo Academy female uniform and had a petite figure, usually befitting one of her age. She went by the name of Shitori Sona, the student council president of this academy, and quite possibly a supernatural being that he wanted absolutely nothing to do with. Uzumaki Naruto, the transfer student, Sona stated matter-of-factly, giving Naruto a sudden chill from her tone. It was the tone he was somewhat familiar with now, the tone of an upcoming lecture. But before Naruto could make an attempt to escape, the student council president continued. The transfer student that should be in class in order to continue his education, rather than roaming around the school, skipping class, and sleeping during lectures. By this point, Sona's glasses took in the reflection of light, which gave her a natural glare without having to make the expression for it. He had to admit, that was pretty cool. Listen, I had a good reason for it. Naruto began, before getting cut off by Sona again. I'm sure you have your reasons, Uzumaki-san, but attaining an education is your most important goal right now. It is what you should be focusing on so that you could become a good and prosperous citizen. This is for your future. Sona claimed with conviction. Naruto was momentarily stunned at the complete faith that she held in her statement, thrown off by it a bit. Admittedly, he wasn't sure what he should expect from these so-called supernatural beings. Were they just like humans, where some were good and some were bad? Or maybe they all fell into some sort of personality category? But so far, if he used her as a benchmark, maybe they all weren't so different from humans at all? He hoped so, that way, if push came to shove, then he could possibly reach an agreement with some of these people so that he didn't become their target. At least, that was a possible plan for the future. Thank you for your concern, Shitori-san. But I had to take care of my younger sister at home. So I had to leave school early. Naruto lied through his teeth. He was never a good liar to begin with, but this one was so bad that even he had to admit it. Well, maybe he can just have a clone henge into Naruto or something, in case suspicions arose later. The president raised an eyebrow before a small smile grew on her face. Very well, Uzumaki-san, but keep up with your studies from here on out. Sona, apparently, approved of his actions, if her more supportive attitude was of any indication. To her, it was good that he wanted to go home and take care of a sibling, so she didn't want to stop him, but she also didn't want to encourage his lax behavior in regards to his studies. She, perhaps, had a soft spot for elder siblings, who rushed to take care of their younger siblings. Now, if only her own elder sister wasn't so embarrassing, then maybe. Thank you, Shitori-san. I'll see y'all later, alright? Naruto said loudly, desperate to make sure that he wouldn't be caught lying by getting out of there as soon as possible. He once more began to run at what he considered to be an average human speed, but what he considered average actually appeared to Sona as speeds that only the fastest human runner in the world, Usain Bolt, could achieve. Sona was, of course, shocked to see an ordinary teenage boy run so fast. Either the boy was a naturally gifted runner or perhaps he was something exceptional among his fellow humans. Regardless, that burst of impressive talent got her to ponder whether he could be a potential candidate for her peerage, as she had quite a few openings left to fill. She decided to look into the matter later, but first, she had to have a conversation with her best friend, Rias, about potential candidates for their peerages, and how best to divide the spoils between them. Fair was fair after all. Looks like Kuo Academy truly is a place where potential congregates, right, Tsubaki? Sona asked, at first to what seemed like no one in particular. Though it turned out not to be the case, as one of her closest friends, her queen, Shinra Tsubaki, appeared to the right side of the bespectacled girl without prompt. Tsubaki was a well-endowed young woman with straight black hair that reached her knees, along with heterochromic eyes, with her left eye and right eye being violet and light brown respectively. Her own glasses glinted in the light mysteriously as she regarded her king and responded, "Yes, Uzumaki Naruto would indeed be an excellent addition to your peerage, Sona Kaichu. He seems to be a better prospect than Hyodo Issei at the very least." The student council president narrowed her eyes faintly. "Oh yes. The young man that Rias had her eye on, the one with the suspected sacred gear." Neither of them really knew what the boy held within him, and Sona disliked taking chances, especially when she considered that Hyodo already had quite the reputation throughout the school already. It wasn't a good reputation. Which was why, so far, Uzumaki was the better choice for her. But first, "Come, Tsubaki, we should be on our way, Rias is expecting us," Sona stated, turning around and heading towards the direction of the Occult Research Club building. They had much to discuss. Naruto was jogging his way back home, despite his impatience. After the run-in with No Nakayuki, he really didn't want to run the risk of tipping off his abilities to her, lest he incur the girl's suspicion and make a new enemy in the visage of this so-called hero tribe. Also, he had to find a place to train in order to prepare himself for what seemed like a probable conflict. Since he was busy gathering information on the world and the supernatural, he never really registered that he needed to train. What with how noticeable that action would be. It seems stupid as a matter of fact. Why would he ruin his anonymity by training every now and again when he wasn't in any danger? That, and he had no clue where he could find a place to train. But now, of course, there was at least one faction that knew that he wasn't normal, so he needed to get himself back into shape. Just in case. The only problem that he really had was that he was quite a bit slower, physically and in reaction speed, than when he fought pain. He was regretting his decision now. That being said, it wasn't like he was weak or anything. He was more than positive that he was stronger and faster than most of these supernatural beings. It was more of a long-term problem than anything else. So, the best thing for him to do would be to find a nice forest near Kuo Town, and use Fuinjutsu to hide his energy signal. Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu was something that he recently dabbled in, seeing as he had the tools necessary for it, and he practically had nothing better to do with his free time. The Fuinjutsu scrolls which Ero Sennin gave him for his training, which were left in a seal, always accessible to him, if he wanted it. Never touched while he was back at Konoha, far too concerned with real tangible power and strength than the mysterious art that his master was so advanced in. His perverted old man of a master forced him to keep it as a precaution, hoping that the blonde would, one day, try and do something with it. Naruto laughed it off at the time, but it turned out that the old pervert was a hell of a lot smarter than he gave him credit for. The shinobi twitched, becoming more somber at the thought. But then he shook his head, deciding to exit from that train of thought, knowing nothing good would come from it. First and foremost, he had to focus on finding a place to train. But before he even did that, he needed a nap, as well as a nice feast of ramen to cool his nerves. One could not train on an empty stomach after all. Night was rapidly approaching when Naruto woke up from his nap. As soon as he was lucid enough, the young man immediately began to gather all of his supplies and tools, aware that he should probably make the best of his training. Ero Sennin gave him quite a bit of paper slips to practice Fuinjutsu on, giving him plenty to practice on if he so wanted. He has actually learned about Fuinjutsu before, so he knew the basics, like how to make a paper bomb for instance. Though, muffling energy signals were definitely a bit more complicated than that. And something that he, only recently, managed to nail down. Basically, he wasn't a master by any means, but he had a decent grasp on what to do. Naruto barely dabbled in Fuinjutsu back in his world, but now, in this world, it suddenly became much more important to learn about. Especially when he remembered all of the incredible things that Fuinjutsu could legitimately accomplish, which inspired him to actually, really, give it a shot. It was rough at first, but he thought that he was doing all right, all things considered. Though he doubted that he'd ever become good enough to use Fuinjutsu to head back home or anything. So that idea was out of the question. Naruto was still thinking about his actions throughout the last 2 months as he was putting on his casual clothes and walked outside, prepared to start his search. Since, by this point, it was quite dark, he decided to forego his usual practice of fitting in and just began to jump across the rooftops at breakneck speeds. Thankfully, as he was moving, and after doing some brainstorming, the blonde quickly remembered that there was a forest-like area at the northwestern part of Kuo town, having passed by it when he entered the town in the first place. Perfect. Changing course slightly, the shinobi soared through the many buildings of the human settlement, reaching his destination in a matter of seconds. When he actually arrived, he quickly gave the forest around him a once-over, determining whether it would work for him. Not bad, nowhere near as impressive as Konoha's forests, but I doubt that any forest in this world can top that. Naruto said with a grin, as he decided to drop his supplies on the ground to begin. He needed to actually draw the seals that would suppress energy signals, one that would work for a decent enough area for his training. Thankfully, he had plenty of practice with his 2-month time frame. As soon as Naruto finished drawing those very seals, the blonde twitched, cut off from his work as he felt something. It was a spike of energy from a ways away, supernatural energy, which he has gotten used to thanks to his 2-month stay in this world. At first, the shinobi didn't recognize it, but he did sense that, whatever it was further up north in the forest. For a few moments, he stayed like this, trying to grasp at this feeling. Then it clicked in his head, an image of bat-like wings on an individual's back appearing in the forefront of his mind. He didn't know what it was called, but he did know which group this feeling belonged to. One of those weird supernatural creatures, devils. So, magic? Maybe? He wasn't sure. Regardless, Naruto grabbed his supplies again and resealed them, taking them with him as he began sprinting to the source of the energy, frowning visibly. Whatever was out there, he had to check it out before he could begin any training. Besides, he was curious. Considering the spike of energy, maybe there was a fight sparking out ahead or something, which could actually be a good stress reliever for him to watch now that he thought about it. Naruto eventually ended his musings when he came upon a peculiar sight once he reached his destination, a battlefield. A battlefield that was recently made thanks to the people that were occupying this piece of the forest. And right in the middle of it were 2 females, who were very much surrounded. Standing back to back against one another, those 2 girls were amidst a virtual sea of creatures of all shapes and sizes, which were obviously here with deadly intentions. Among them, the shorter one was a short girl with childish features, with very risque clothing, if it could be called that anyways. She wore what looked like a black leather top that only covered her up to her ribs and 2 black straps crisscrossing to make an X over her stomach. She also wore pink and white striped stockings, as well as a pair of, quite visible, black underwear. Her long silver hair, which reached to the middle of her back, was flailing around as she jerked her head around her, and her purple eyes were glistening sharply at the dangerous situation that she found herself in. Naruto frowned, narrowing his eyes, studying her closer as he noticed something framing the crown of her head. Wait, were those horns? Naruto couldn't help but do a double take at the sight of the little horns on the girl's head, but quickly snapped himself out of it. Now really wasn't the time to stare. So, taking chance that was given to him in the apparent lull in the fighting, the blonde focused his attention on the other figure who, he assumed, to be the silverette's partner. The other girl was far more, physically at least, likely to be around the blonde's age, and thankfully didn't make him feel like he was committing a crime by staring. She had vibrant red hair, which was partially pulled into 2 separate pigtails that were held together with a pair of long black strings, with the rest of her hair flowing freely down to her waist, framing her pink eyes. In terms of physique, she was practically the polar opposite of the other girl, as she had quite the voluptuous body, which was contained in a pink top that was hanging on her shoulders, and a frilly blue skirt to complete her ensemble. All in all, the duo was quite the interesting pair, one that most wouldn't see every day. And they were both clearly under great distress, since they were up against multiple monsters on all sides. Naruto stared at the 2 of them for a moment, stuck in indecision. If he wanted, he could just leave and pretend that this never happened. After all, they weren't his problem anyway. Hell, he didn't even know if they were good people or not, so maybe helping them could be a bad thing? He was supposed to lay low, so helping random people would just garner him attention from unnecessary people, and he has no guarantee that they were even worth the effort. The smart thing to do here was to turn away and pretend that he didn't see anything. Yeah, the smart thing. Sighing, the blonde swiftly took out a hidden kunai under his right sleeve, already knowing that he never was good at doing the smart thing. If things got rough for him for helping out others, then so be it. Much rather that than bear with the guilt of abandoned people in need to monsters. Without making a sound, the shinobi charged in, intent on getting those girls out alive and unharmed. The first of the monsters that took notice of the blonde was an ugly half-human, half-fish monstrosity, which barely managed to notice him as it turned around, making an attempt at roaring out to grab the attention of the other beasts. It was far too slow. With eyes so sharp that it was unbefitting on the face of a teenaged boy, Naruto swiftly swung his fist at the stomach of the beast, knocking all of the air in the monster's body. With that done, he quickly and efficiently stabbed his kunai through the monster's throat, ending its life before it ever got the chance to warn its comrades. Unsurprisingly, the shinobi wasn't too concerned about mindless monsters, as he felt nothing but bloodlust from them. Not waste any time, he moved on to the next one. A man that had a pincer for a mouth and sharp claws for hands. A combo that was pretty damn gross if you asked him, but hey, it wasn't about to matter in about a second, as the shinobi finally decided to announce his presence to ally and foe alike in a true Naruto-like fashion. I hope you bastards didn't try and start the party without me. Naruto shouted in exuberance as the bug man quickly turned around, only to be met with steel for its trouble, as the kunai dug deep into its probable brain. The bug beast fell like a stone, with Naruto charging towards his next victim. As soon as Blonde's declaration rang out, it stopped the fighting that was about to start anew for a split second, long enough so that everyone there could acknowledge the newcomer in slight shock. That shock vanished for the monstrous creatures when they saw that two of their comrades were down, and who exactly was responsible. Two monsters quickly flew into a frenzy and charged the blonde, getting him to start a new round of clever in his mind quips, before he noticed that the third and final monster was about to take advantage of the girl's momentary distraction. "Oi, don't gawk at me. Look out," Naruto shouted to them, breaking both of them out of their reverie. In alarm at the incoming attacks, they both moved to dodge the final monster's assault, but the redhead was too slow, and was stabbed by one of the monster's sharp legs right through her shoulder. "Mio-sama!" The little silver-haired girl cried out, charging forward to engage the final monster, her face twisting in worry. "Hang in there." Right at that moment, Naruto realized that, while holding back was important, this was not the time for doing so, as those two were now barely holding out. So, with practiced ease, he dodged both the flying goblin's nosedive and the standing pit bull's hard fist, before channeling wind chakra through his kunai. In a blink, the shinobi moved to the side of both monsters, sliding, in order to line them both up for a shot. Without hesitation, he threw the kunai at speeds neither of the beasts could react to, and cleanly pierced both the pit bull and flying goblin through their chests. Both beasts fell in short order. Though Naruto didn't actually see them fall, as he was already moving to back up the kid, confident enough in his skills to know that they were down. As the blonde ran towards the final monster, which was preoccupied with a scantily dressed girl, he brought out the kunai hidden in his shirt's left sleeve and channeled wind chakra through it as well. Ducked under the body of the strange hybrid of a spider and a woman, he sliced off each one of its legs before the monster even realized what had happened. When she did, however, it screamed out in pain and stumbled back on her stumps, giving the scantily clad girl the opening that she needed. The silverette then brought her small fist out and smashed her fist at the spider-woman's body, sending it through a tree, practically taking it down and killing the monster instantly. And, just like that, the little battle was over. Naruto wasn't focused on that, however, as he moved to the red-headed girl which had received the stab wound, face tight with slight worry. He wasn't a medic by any means, but thankfully, he did have a basic knowledge of some basics, thanks to being around Ba-chan and Sakura-chan. Taking a cursory glance, he quickly figured that the wound wasn't bad, it was superficial. Still, she was unconscious, though he doubted that it had much to do with the attack itself. As he was checking her out, he quickly noticed the dark bags there were under her eyes, making his lips flatten. The girl was exhausted. If she was already at the brink before she actually got stabbed, then that could have probably made her collapse thanks to sudden the pain, shocking her system enough to knock her out cold. In short, she needed rest, desperately. While this was happening, the Silverette cautiously moved to the blonde man's side, anxiously waiting for whatever he had to say. The two of them were in a bad spot, so while she didn't trust him completely, he did prove to, at least, want them alive. Something that she couldn't say that a lot of people wanted. More than that, he helped them fight off a lot of stray devils when it would have been easier to just stay out of the whole affair altogether. Plus, if she really thought about it, she doubted she could really do anything to stop him anyway, since the skills he used to take out the insane devils were outside of her abilities. Unless she used her trump card, but she wasn't willing to risk it with Mio-sama in such a state. The girl is fine, just tired, the wound ain't too serious either, so she will be alright as long as she gets some rest and cleans up the wound. Naruto finally spoke up with a small smile of reassurance. The girl let out a sigh of relief at the news and nodded her thanks, moving to her young charge in order to pick her up with her strength. In the process of this, she was going to thank their savior properly, before she froze up. Naruto frowned at the Silverette's sudden reaction, becoming wary of another attack. What's wrong? Are there more of them? No, it isn't that. The girl with the horns replied, her eyebrows scrunching as she pondered on their bad position. The reason that she was locking up was simple. The both of them were moving around during the middle of the night for good reason, unfortunately, as their last refuge was found out by the very stray devils that were hunting them down. No doubt, to them, they were probably just like two tasty snacks to be devoured. If they returned to their last refuge now, then she had no doubt that they would be attacked by even more stray devils, especially the ones that were instinctively looking to raise their own strength. Her young charge was half human, and the unique smell that she had thanks to her ancestry helped attract stray devils from quite the distance away to her, in the hopes that they could eat what they viewed as a delicacy. Not only that, but the redhead was also unconscious. Before she could fall into despair due to their situation, an idea sprang to mind, which could probably buy them some reprieve, a temporary home. A safe place to rest. Internally preparing herself, she quickly turned to their blonde savior and pitched her idea. Hopeful. My young charge is wounded and unconscious, while I am tired from the day's fight. Taking that into account, I'd like to ask you whether you could offer us a temporary home where we could recuperate. In return for this favor, I wouldn't mind doing whatever you want for payment. Even as she was speaking, she was cringing at the possible degrading things that she may have to endure, well aware that offering herself up like that could very well remove the young man's inhibitions. But it was fine, as long as it was for her charge's sake. She was her guardian, and even if she rarely conversed with her, she was still someone that she would guard, no matter what. Which was why she was locking eyes intensely with the blonde, showing him her grim determination. Naruto didn't say anything at first, the only cues being that he raised his arm up slowly into the air, hanging there, as if he was raising his hand for the teacher to call him. Then he suddenly swiped his arm back down, slamming his hand down onto the Silverette's skull. Hard. The girl yelped as she face-planted onto the ground with a comical bump upside her head, recovering after a spare second as she looked up at the blonde with teary eyes. He didn't look amused. The shinobi, for his part, was very upset at the thought that someone would think that he was heartless enough to take advantage of the situation. Among the duo, the redhead was out cold, and needed rest, while her guardian was exhausted, leaving both incredibly vulnerable in the middle of the forest where they could get attacked again. For all intents and purposes, he was going to offer them a place to stay anyway. Yellow eyes locked onto the screen of her cell phone, which was ringing, the caller it identifying who it was. Things have changed dramatically since earlier that day, and required her to contact the hero tribe's leader so that he could be aware of the exact circumstances, at least before she could proceed with anything. In the northwestern area of Kuo town, there was a forest area that was perfect for someone who didn't want to be found to do some exercises. Keeping in shape was paramount for her career as a hero. Yet, as she was in that forest, she very quickly found that she wasn't alone in the area. Before she could even start back then, something quickly caught her attention, distracting her from her training. It was noise, a lot of noise. Specifically, it was the extraordinarily familiar sound of battle that caught her ear. Opting to go and check out what was going on, she sped towards the source of the sound while trying not to alert the combatants to her presence, cautious. What she would run into was a scene of a battle, one where two females were holding their own against a small group of stray devils. Before she could even do anything productive, a certain blonde would enter the fray, turning the tide of the fight and saving the two girls. She was barely able to hear what they were conversing about, but she managed to catch enough to quickly determine that the redhead among them was, in fact, one of her targets. And her other target, the blonde troublemaker himself, had just thrown his lot in with them. This was, simply the worst possible scenario. Two of her targets were now seemingly allied with one another for whatever reason. And of all of the possible scenarios that could have occurred over the, internally dubbed, unknown variable, the absolute worst has occurred. It was one thing to deal with the first Mao Lucifer's final daughter and her guardian, as their abilities were, she figured, not too impressive when all things were considered. But Uzumaki Naruto on the other hand. She knew that he had a massive source of power, but she thought that he never really got the chance to learn how to use it properly. So, initially, he didn't really seem like a threat. At least, before she saw the thorough slaughter that the blonde had engineered against the stray devils. He was, without a doubt, someone to be wary of. Ostensibly though, if his rush to help the two devils were of any indication, he was probably aware of their relations. Which could only mean that the blonde was aware of the supernatural by the time that she talked to him. This thesis was backed up by his complete lack of surprise by the sight of the many stray devils, as well as his confidence in dealing with them. Thankfully, Uzumaki's focus on the battle most definitely allowed her to study him, so she had to thank her good fortune. Because now, she could, mostly, determine how powerful the teenaged boy really was. If that incident was an accurate representation of his skills at least. Still, what really bothered her, even as she was thinking it, her yellow eyes were hardening. Uzumaki Naruto had broke his word. He claimed that he wouldn't do anything to harm the normal students in the academy? Well, now that he's thrown his lot in with those devils, he's effectively done just that. Devils and humans had never got along. Especially since devils have always tried to control humans for their own gains. She had no doubt that the two devils in Kuo Academy were the same. More than that, she was a warrior with a sense of honor, and Uzumaki had broke that sacred honor. Willingly and irrevocably. He was trash to her now. But he was still very powerful trash, so, for that reason alone, she was contacting her superior. Her musings ended when someone on the other line picked up the phone and answered. Yuki-kun, anything to report? Straight and to the point, good. There have been complications with the new targets you gave me. The former Mao's daughter has allied herself with the unknown variable that you told me about, and that variable has turned out to be very strong. Nonaka Yuki stated with a frown, obviously displeased at the turn of events. The voice on the other end paused, taking in this information, before responding. I see. Well then, I'll ask you one question, Yuki-kun. If he's truly that powerful, then I'd prefer it if you didn't face this unknown variable by yourself. However, if you think you can, I'll give you the go-ahead. So, can you do it? The masculine voice on the other line asked, serious. Yuki took a moment to ponder that. Both of the devils were weakened after their fight, which left them as nothing more than burdens rather than reliable comrades. That only left Uzumaki. He was fast, faster than her no doubt, but from what she saw, it wasn't by much. She had fought with speed types before, and she had no doubt that Uzumaki Naruto was a speed type. More than that, he was a short-range fighter, and heavily depended on those two strange knives that he utilized. She now knew how he fought, while Uzumaki had no idea how she fought. The young hero clenched her fist, remembering her duty. Her training. She was a soldier and she would do her duty. I can do it, Yuki claimed with conviction, prepared to eliminate Uzumaki Naruto if he gave her a reason to doubt his word. Very well, you have my permission to continue forward. The masculine voice stated in a firm voice. Your main objective is Uzumaki Naruto, since the daughter of the original Lucifer is being hunted down by the fervent supporters of the recently made government in the underworld, so best to focus on watching her. She will probably die in time, but this unknown variable must be dealt with, understood? Yuki nodded in understanding, recalling what she has heard about the situation in the underworld. Apparently, only recently has the previous Lucifer actually been caught and executed by the underworld's government after he escaped from his defeat at the hands of Sears's Gremory and his comrades. Now, while the current Yondai Mao don't support the Zealots, they really couldn't do much about it, even if they tried to force the issue. The group was pretty popular with those that wanted to completely prevent any possible counter-revolution from occurring. Many devils who have found themselves at the receiving end of the original Lucifer's heavy hand in the past now had a perfect scapegoat in his daughter, and, despite how relatively unknown she was, they continued searching for her. Of course, outlawing such a disorganized group would only draw angry mobs without actually stopping it from continuing its work, business as usual. So they didn't, and the hero tribe only recently got their hands on such information. But it was definitely valuable in determining who was the more important target. "I won't fail," was all Yuki said, before hanging up the phone. To an outside observer, the chess game between Rias Gremory and Sona Citri, both of whom were among the most popular girls in Kuo Academy, was just a friendly game between friends. In most cases, if you saw two childhood friends play chess, then you'd be right. This time, however, they just so happened to be giving each other death glares as their natural competitiveness took over. It didn't help that they were the respective leaders of their own clubs, which were used to hide their devil activities from normal human eyes. The peerages of both of the kings were present as well, displaying varying degrees of amusement at their usually mature leaders acting like children, squabbling with one another. Though, at the moment, Sona was looking on in thinly veiled amusement as she watched her friend try to find a way to protect her king piece without losing her last rook. "So, how is your investigation going along? The one about your potential new peerage member, Rias?" Blue-green eyes shifted from the board to the violet ones of the student council president in annoyance. Her lack of available moves on the chessboard was getting to her. The bespectacled girl quirked an eyebrow, patiently waiting for a response as she gave her rival a chance to concentrate on her next move. "It's rather difficult to discern currently, Sona. But that's all right, since I have already asked Kaneko-chan here to use her strong nose to check his scent, in the hopes that it could give us a clue to what his sacred gear actually is," Rias eventually claimed, a noticeably growing smile lighting up her face. Sona noticed Rias' growing happiness and couldn't stop her curiosity from growing along with it, wondering what Rias' resident rook found out. Yet, despite her growing interest, she didn't want to lose by admitting as much to her rival. So she held her tongue and concentrated on the chess game, her violet eyes crinkling in slight annoyance. Thankfully, Tsubaki, her queen, noticed her reticence and decided to do the honors herself, saving her from her admittedly childish dilemma. "What did Kaneko-san find exactly, Rias-sama?" Tsubaki asked, earning a pout from the young Gremory, disappointed that Sona herself didn't admit to her curiosity. Beside her, Rias' queen began to giggle at her king's antics. She really was too cute sometimes. Era, Rias, are you upset that Tsubaki-san asked you and Sona-chan didn't?" asked Himejima Akeno with a sly smile, the second most popular girl in Kuo Academy. Rias glared at her queen through the side of her eye, before ignoring her question entirely, which in turn, just made Akeno break out into a new round of giggles. The redhead shifted her attention to her rook, Teju Kaneko, and motioned her to come to her. Teju Kaneko stepped up to her king, ready to give her report on the person that she has now dubbed as the pervert. "Bucko asked me to use my enhanced sense of smell to check what sacred gear the pervert had, the other day. I managed to get close to him yesterday while the pervert was away running from the swimming club, again." Even as she was speaking, the end of her lips were twisting downwards, expressing her displeasure without words. Now, most people would think that she was only a little upset over Hyodo Issei's actions, but anyone who knew her also knew that even the smallest amount emotion out of the usually stoic girl was very indicative of her mood. In short, she was less than enthused by the perverted boy's actions. "Please continue, Kaneko-chan," Rias encouraged, her growing grin hinting to how much she was going to enjoy her friend's reaction. Kaneko nodded and continued, "When I got close to the pervert, I managed to catch his scent, which I recognized as." She hesitated there, unsure if she was sure in her assessment or not. Still, she soldiered on regardless. A dragon. Kaneko finished, while maintaining her standard monotone voice. Completely unlike her though, Rias, for her part, responded with a full-blown victorious grin thanks to the information's implications. And, if the widening of a pair of violet eyes were any indication, then those implications were big news indeed. Dragons were legendary creatures of immense power and prestige, so much so in fact, that the sacred gears that were based off of them were all quite powerful. More than that, very precious few sacred gears could smell like a dragon, which helped narrow down the possibilities. Rias may have just hit the jackpot. Sona couldn't help but cursed internally, more than a little put out that she didn't put more effort in finding out what that boy carried. That being said, it wasn't like she would have tried to pull him into her peerage or anything, but, at the very least, she could have bargained with her friend, rival for the right to recruit the young man. Despite how childish it sounded, there was a reason for her frustration. Essentially, there was an unspoken rule between them in regards to the acquisition of new peerage members in and around Kuo town. That rule went along with the idea of finders keepers, where the one who finds a prospective peerage member with a lot of promise is allowed to convince them into their group without the other's interference. Unless, of course, they negotiate between themselves about who has the right to get a shot first. If she found Hyodo Issei first, then she could have earned a favor from her friend, for use in the future. It's always best to have an eye to the future, just in case. Yet Rias found Issei first, and now held the right to recruit him into her peerage, so it was too late for any sly attempts at forcing the redhead's hand. Sona sighed as she peered at the chessboard again, registering all of the possible moves that could lead her to victory in their game, wondering what play she should make. Then it hit her. More precisely, the image of a certain blonde student with blue eyes and strange whisker marks hit her. All at once, the young black-haired girl did a 180 in attitude as she decided to broach the subject with her friend, fully expecting to ruin her victory parade before it really began. Such was her competitiveness with her. While I am happy for your success in finding a new peerage member, Rias, there is something that I have to discuss with you before you celebrate. Sona stated seriously, knowing full well that, all games aside, they should discuss about any strange happenings that occur in Kuo town, especially in Kuo Academy. Rias' expression switched from light-hearted to straight-faced in a second, understanding that playtime was over. I have recently met a new transfer student to Kuo Academy today. At first glance, he seemed to be a normal human teenager, but he did something afterwards that made me suspect that he wasn't quite normal. Sona explained, as the light caught her glasses, giving her a foreboding look. Deciding to ignore that, her friend responded. Who is this boy? What tipped you off to this, Sona? Looking at Rias straight in the eye, she responded. His name was Uzumaki Naruto, and he was a second-year student. I met him while he was trying to leave the academy grounds, and lectured him on his lackluster effort with his classes before he mentioned that he had a family emergency. The young Citri cut herself off from there, stopping herself from revealing what the family emergency entailed, as that was personal information that Uzumaki gave her. As the student council president, she had a responsibility to not give out that information to others unless they wanted her to. Meanwhile, Rias frowned, not really seeing anything too suspicious about this boy's behavior. At least nothing totally abnormal that couldn't be explained away. It was only after our little talk ended that he did something unnatural. The student council president continued, violet eyes focused. As he was moving to leave the academy, I noticed that he was moving at speeds that a normal human teenager shouldn't be able to. Which was made worse when he didn't appear to be particularly tired afterwards. If anything, her friend's frown deepened further. How fast? Sona didn't bat an eye. As fast, if not faster, than the fastest normal human in the world. Now that made Rias more attentive to her fellow devil's claim, very much seeing how she could be suspicious of how normal this boy was. Do you sense anything different about him? Nothing, Sona answered clearly, figuring that she meant that in a literal manner. It really was strange too, as the blonde had 3 of those whisker-like lines on his cheeks, something that was definitely not normal by any means. Yet, she didn't sense the energy of the yokai within him, so he wasn't a fox or cat yokai or anything. That only left one possible explanation for this then. You think he has a sacred gear? A powerful one at that, I expect. Rias murmured with growing realization, interpreting her rival's mindset. Most sacred gears stayed dormant inside humans for their entire lives without notice, allowing them to continue to live their lives as normal beings. However, some sacred gears were so powerful that they actively aided the holder despite being dormant in their soul. Yet, only the most powerful of sacred gears could possibly do something like that, which meant that this, Naruto, could very well have enormous potential. So you've been quite busy yourself, eh Sona? The red-headed devil asked with a knowing smile. A smile which had the student council president narrow her eyes. That smile meant that the young devil had a decidedly good idea, and in such a situation, where they were talking about an individual that had enormous potential, that smile was nothing except bad news for her. Hey, Sona, do you remember that favor that you owe me in regards to Tsubaki? I would like to cash it in, Rias expressed with a cheerful smile. Sona felt her eyes widen at her friend's words, before sighing and placing her hand on the top of her forehead, already figuring out what was coming next. The reason she even shared this information with Rias in the first place was due to the fact that finders keepers would be in place, allowing her to lay claim to grabbing the strange blonde without interference. If the rule wasn't in place, then she would have kept quiet about it until she learned more about the blonde. The two childhood friends were also rivals after all. But now it seemed that her rival has decided to change the standard rules of the game, invoking her favor. That favor in question was in regards to Rias' aid in helping Sona acquire her first peerage member in Shinra Tsubaki. When they were younger, apparently, Rias stumbled upon Sona's future queen after the incident where Rias acquired her own queen, thanks to the actions of a particularly rowdy groups of exorcists. Exorcist groups that were closely involved with the Japanese Shinto gods. Among those exorcists groups were the Himejima clan, who were considered to be among the most powerful and influential family of exorcists in Japan. Back then, that clan, after a long series of complicated events, were hunting down Rias' queen, Akeno, who was related to the clan's leadership and exiled. Rias personally intervened on her future friend's behalf, forcing the clan to the bargaining table in order to get them off of her back. Before she even brought them to the talks though, it appeared that the Himejima clan had managed to inform the other, less influential, exorcist clans of their plight, mobilizing them in the name of protecting their purity. So the Himejima needed to inform the other clans of the new development, otherwise Akeno would continue to be hunted down by the Shinto-aligned exorcists. It was then, during the meeting between Rias and the disparate Shinto-aligned groups, that the young devil would meet Shinra Tsubaki, a girl from the relatively undistinguished Shinra clan. A girl who was isolated due to her power of attracting supernatural beings. Honestly, back then, Rias would have taken her as another peerage member herself, but then, she remembered something. Her friend and rival, Sona, was currently lacking of peerage members at the time. Add to the fact that Rias herself had her hands full in making sure Akeno would join her without the Himejima clan's interference, and she figured that her friend could give Tsubaki a shot instead. The rest, as they say, is history. Though, she did earn a favor from Sona, thanks to that little tidbit. Rias somewhat regretted her decision later on though, since in only a year later, she would be faced with a threat that would need to build up her peerage to become as formidable as possible. Which was why she was invoking her favor now, several years later, for this boy. This is highly irregular, Rias. Isn't there something else that you'd like to request of me as a favor? Sona asked with a twitching eyebrow, her irritation becoming obvious. For Rias to use that favor, which she held over her head for the past several years now, of all times. Unfortunately, I would like to use it now. I'm sure you that are relieved that you don't have to worry about Uzumaki Naruto anymore, since I'm going to take him off your hands now. The young Gremory stated blithely, grinning from ear to ear as she finally made her move on the chessboard. Sona just groaned, and moved her rook to capture Rias' king, winning the chess game without much effort. Yet, somehow, even though she knew she won this game, she still felt like she lost. It was an irony that was annoying to think about. Naruto just stared across the table at the two recent newcomers, present in what he considered to be his home base. His home away from home, his safe zone, The place where he can let Uzumaki Naruto reign free once more. Well, at least it used to be. Blue Eyes regarded a pair of pink and purple eyes coolly, aware that the individuals who owned those eyes have thoroughly destroyed any hope of him keeping his anonymity by their sheer presence. To be honest, he was still kind of in shock. What exactly has he got himself into this time exactly? These two girls have recently told him their story. How Maria was a succubus devil hybrid, and how Mio was a hybrid of a devil and a human. Hell, he didn't know that hybrids were a thing until now, such was his ignorance. But the redhead, she wasn't just any kind of half-devil. She was the daughter of Lucifer. The real Lucifer, the one that he read so much about through his clones, and apparently, the former leader of the devil